I started noticing subtle changes in Rachel that I couldn't quite shake off. It began with her being late for work, an occurrence that, at first, I dismissed as the usual morning rush or an occasional late meeting. But soon, it wasn't just her timing. It was the way she clutched her phone with an intensity that seemed almost desperate. Every time I asked a question about her day, her answers came off as curt, almost indifferent, as if she were rehearsing lines she didn't really mean. There was one instance that still haunts me. I had invited her to a corporate party, expecting us to share a light evening together, a break from our routine. Instead, she brushed off the invitation with a remark that stung. "It's a boring event, you'll hate it." It wasn't just her words. It was the tone, the dismissiveness that made me wonder if she had already decided I wasn't worth the effort, or worse, if she was hiding something significant. Then there were the small details that didn't add up. I found receipts for expensive lingerie, items I'd never seen her purchase before. It was as if she were constructing a persona entirely separate from the wife I'd known for years. These weren't just random splurges. They were carefully chosen, almost like pieces in a puzzle meant for someone else's image. The expensive purchases, her constant phone fixation, her sudden disinterest in our shared life. It all began to paint a picture that was increasingly hard to ignore. At first, I tried rationalizing it all. Maybe she was simply exploring new interests or embracing a newfound independence at work. But every time I attempted to bridge the gap between us with honest conversation, I was met with walls of indifference. The more I probed, the more I felt like I was chasing shadows. The realization crept in slowly, a nagging thought that I was being deceived by the person I had trusted most. That sense of betrayal was a seed that grew with every passing day until I finally reached a breaking point. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was a hidden truth lurking behind her every smile and every nonchalant remark. So, driven by a mix of desperation and a need for answers, I decided to do something I never imagined myself capable of. I began to spy on her. The decision wasn't taken lightly. I knew that by stepping into this covert role, I was risking everything: our trust, our history, and perhaps even my own sense of self. Yet, as I set up my small surveillance measures, a part of me clung to the hope that I'd discover something that could explain all these puzzling behaviors. That hope, however, was quickly overshadowed by a rising dread. Every minute detail, from the extra care she took with her appearance to the secretive glances exchanged over her phone, suggested that there was far more to her story than I had ever imagined. That first night of watching her from the shadows was surreal. I felt like I was standing at the edge of an abyss, peering into a reality where nothing was as it seemed. Each moment filled me with a mix of anxiety and a burning curiosity to uncover the truth. I was stepping into a realm where every whisper of fabric, every tapped screen, and every unexplained delay carried the weight of potential betrayal. Little did I know, this investigation would lead me down a labyrinth of secrets and unexpected twists, turning my once familiar life into a series of revelations that would force me to question everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and the very essence of who we are. In that moment, as I wrestled with my own doubts and fears, I knew that there was no turning back. I was committed to peeling back the layers of deception, no matter where they might lead me. I arrived at the party with a heavy heart and a storm of emotions swirling inside me. The invitation had led me to a luxurious hall that looked more like the grand lobby of a five-star hotel than a corporate event. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and the polished marble floors reflected the glimmer of lights, giving everything an ethereal, almost surreal quality. As I stepped further into the room, my eyes couldn't help but catch sight of rows upon rows of champagne bottles, each tagged at a staggering $500 a pop, a glaring reminder of how far removed this place was from anything I'd ever known. I tried to blend into the crowd, hoping to find a discreet spot where I could watch without being seen. My mind was racing, every detail of Rachel's recent behavior replaying in my head like a twisted montage. And then, just as I began to think that my worst fears were a product of my overactive imagination, I saw her. There, in the center of the extravagant chaos, stood Rachel, not alone, but intimately close to another man. He was impossible to miss, impeccably dressed in an expensive suit that seemed tailored just for him, with an aura of confidence that bordered on arrogance. He was pressing Rachel gently but possessively against the bar, his hand lingering at the small of her back as if he owned the moment. Nearby, another man stood silently, a shadowy figure whose eyes followed every move with unnerving intensity. I couldn't tell if he was a friend or an accomplice, but his presence only deepened the mystery. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched the scene unfold. In the midst of this elaborate display of luxury and debauchery, our eyes met. For a split second, it was as if time had slowed to a crawl. Rachel's gaze was steady, almost defiant, and then, astonishingly, she smiled at me. That smile wasn't one of regret or fear. It was playful, almost mocking, as if she were toying with my emotions like a child playing a game. It sent a shockwave through me, a mix of humiliation, anger, and disbelief. I could barely process the sight as she reached for a glass. It wasn't just any glass. It was one of those delicate, seemingly priceless pieces that cost around $100 each. With a nonchalant grace, she accepted it and then, as if on cue, turned and slipped away. I watched helplessly as she climbed into an elevator with the two strangers, disappearing from my line of sight. In that moment, the world seemed to tilt on its axis. Every luxury, every whispered secret of that hall was now a stark reminder of the betrayal that had shattered our life. Standing there amidst the clinking of glasses and the soft murmur of conversations, I felt an overwhelming surge of rage and despair. It wasn't just the physical betrayal. It was the calculated, almost theatrical manner in which it was carried out. The scene was too staged, too rehearsed, as if I were watching a well-directed play in which I was the only unwilling audience member. My thoughts spiraled into a chaos of self-doubt and anger. I couldn't help but wonder, how long had this been going on? Was I merely a convenient placeholder, someone to be cast aside in favor of something, or someone more exciting? Every detail etched itself into my memory. The way her eyes met mine with that enigmatic smile, the subtle movements that betrayed a familiarity between her and the men beside her. I felt a bitter mix of betrayal and helplessness. There was a part of me that wanted to rush to the elevator, to confront her and demand answers, but I was frozen in place, paralyzed by the enormity of the realization. This wasn't just an infidelity. It was a full-blown performance of deception, a calculated display meant to dismantle everything I believed in. I tried to steady my breathing as I backed away slowly, each step echoing my internal turmoil. Every detail, the clink of the expensive glass in her hand, the smooth, unhurried motion of her ascent in the elevator, replayed over and over in my mind. I felt as if I were trapped in a nightmare where the lines between reality and performance blurred. The anger inside me was no longer a simmering ember. It had erupted into a blazing fury that threatened to consume every rational thought. In that extravagant hall, amidst the glittering lights and lavish decor, I found myself isolated in a sea of faces that now seemed indifferent to my pain. I couldn't decide if the setting was meant to amplify the decadence of their secret world, or if it was simply a cruel backdrop for my personal tragedy. All I knew was that I had stumbled upon something far deeper and more disturbing than I had ever imagined. A web of lies, secrets, and calculated seduction that left me questioning not only the woman I loved, but also the foundation of everything I had once believed to be true. As I lingered in that moment, the realization struck me with brutal clarity. My life was about to change forever. The betrayal wasn't just a betrayal of trust. It was a betrayal of our shared dreams, our promises, and the very essence of our connection. The opulent surroundings, the expensive champagne, and the carefully orchestrated display of intimacy were all part of a game in which I had never been invited to play. And now, as the elevator doors closed behind her, I knew there was no going back. Only a dark and uncertain path ahead, where every step would be haunted by the ghost of what once was, and the bitter taste of deceit that now defined us both. The shrill ring of my phone shattered the pre-dawn silence, jolting me awake at 5 a.m. I stared at the screen, barely daring to hope it was nothing more than a wrong number. But deep down I knew it couldn't be. With hesitant fingers, I answered, expecting nothing but the usual automated greeting. Instead, a low, unfamiliar voice spoke, its tone cold and deliberate. "Your wife was with us. Now you owe us." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. For a long, agonizing moment, I couldn't find my voice. My mind raced, each syllable from that stranger slicing through the fragile remnants of my hope. I didn't dare ask for more details. Every instinct screamed that silence was safer than curiosity. Before I could muster a reply, I pressed the end button, and the line went dead, leaving only a heavy void in its wake. Shaken and barely able to breathe, I knew that this was far worse than I had imagined. The betrayal at the party had already scorched my soul, and now this ominous call threatened to add another layer of complexity to an already crumbling reality. My heart pounded as I tried to process the implications. Who were these people, and what did they want from me? But answers were nowhere to be found in the darkness of that early hour. I sat there in silence for what felt like an eternity before I made a decision. There was only one person I could turn to, someone who knew how to handle matters that were anything but ordinary. With a trembling hand, I dialed Logan, a friend from my days in the Army, someone I hadn't seen in 9 long years. Logan was the kind of man who thrived on challenges, whose grit and resourcefulness had always been my lifeline during the darkest of times. After a few rings, his gruff, familiar voice answered, "Adam? What's going on, man?" I didn't bother with pleasantries or explanations. Every word felt loaded with the weight of betrayal and the dread of the unknown. "Logan, meet me at the car repair shop in 20 minutes. We're going hunting." There was a pause on the other end, a silence that made my stomach churn with both anticipation and anxiety. Finally, he replied with a tone that conveyed understanding and a hint of the thrill that came with danger. "Got it. See you there." I hung up the phone, my mind a tempest of thoughts and emotions. The small, dimly lit room of my apartment suddenly felt like a trap, its shadows whispering secrets of impending doom. I didn't know what I was about to face, but I knew I couldn't do this alone. The betrayal, the mysterious call, the danger. They were all part of a game I'd never agreed to play, yet now I was its unwilling participant. As I drove through the empty streets, the city still asleep under a blanket of darkness, every mile seemed to pull me deeper into a labyrinth of uncertainty. The neon signs of the car repair shop came into view, flickering like beacons of a grim destiny. Parking my car, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. The familiar, gritty ambience of the repair shop, a far cry from the lavish corporate settings and glittering halls I had witnessed only hours before, was a welcome contrast. Here, things were real, raw, and unpredictable. I found Logan in his usual spot, leaning casually against an old pickup truck that bore the scars of countless battles. His eyes, sharp and calculating, met mine with a mix of concern and determination. "You okay, man?" That sounded like some serious shit. I could only shake my head, words failing to capture the weight of my thoughts. Instead, I recounted the morning's events in a halting, fragmented way. The mysterious call, the cold message, the ominous tone that had left me feeling more vulnerable than ever. Logan listened intently, nodding slowly as if piecing together the fragments of a puzzle that was more dangerous than anything we'd ever faced before. "This isn't just about your wife," he finally said, his voice low and measured. "Someone's playing a deeper game here, and if they think they can get away with blackmail or manipulation, they're in for a world of hurt." The resolve in his voice was a lifeline, a reminder that I wasn't as alone as I'd feared. We spent the next few minutes outlining a plan. Our strategy was simple but dangerous: to track down the source of the call and confront those behind it. There was no room for hesitation or second-guessing. Every moment counted, and every decision could either bring us closer to the truth or push us further into peril. As we prepared to leave the safety of the repair shop, I couldn't shake the chilling realization that the stakes had just escalated beyond the realm of personal betrayal. This was a high-stakes game of secrets, where the consequences of failure could be catastrophic. With Logan by my side, I felt a surge of determination, mixed with the cold knowledge that the coming hours would test the limits of our resolve. The road ahead was shrouded in uncertainty, and I had no idea what we were about to uncover. But one thing was clear: I was done playing the victim. It was time to fight back, to hunt down the shadows that had infiltrated my life and exact the truth, no matter the cost. And so, with adrenaline coursing through my veins and a grim determination settling in my heart, I followed Logan into the night, ready to face whatever darkness lay ahead. Logan and I rolled up to the five-star hotel under the cloak of night, its glossy facade reflecting a cold detachment that made it seem like a fortress of secrets. The building loomed before us, its polished marble and sleek glass panels promising luxury. And as I was about to learn treachery, we pulled up to the entrance and made our way inside, our steps echoing in the vast, silent lobby. I could feel the tension coiling in my chest as we approached the reception desk. We knew that to get to the truth, sometimes you had to play dirty. Without a word, I slid a crisp $1,000 envelope across the polished counter. The receptionist's eyes widened ever so slightly, and I saw the gears turning behind her composed facade. With a barely perceptible nod, she keyed in a few commands on her computer and moments later handed us a sleek key card. Our room was ready, a small price to pay for information. Logan and I exchanged a look that said everything we couldn't put into words. The plan was simple: find the answers hidden behind this facade of luxury. We made our way to the room, the sound of our footsteps muffled by the plush carpet, until we finally reached the door. Without hesitation, I swung it open. Inside, the room was a stark contrast to the cold efficiency of the lobby. Soft lighting, expensive furnishings, and subtle touches of opulence greeted us. A meticulously curated stage for secrets to be revealed. And there, in the middle of it all, stood Rachel. She was draped in an $800 silk robe that clung to her curves with an air of nonchalance, her hair cascading in soft waves over her shoulders. On the nightstand, a delicate $200 glass of wine caught the light, a silent testament to the luxury that surrounded her. But what struck me most wasn't the opulence. It was her calm, almost defiant composure. For a heartbeat, time seemed to freeze. My mind reeled with questions. What was she doing here? Who were these men with her? And why did she look so unfazed? Before I could let my thoughts spiral further, our eyes locked. Instead of the panic or guilt I'd expected, a mischievous smile played on her lips. "Wow, you're fast," she drawled, her tone both casual and unnerving. It was as if she'd been waiting for me all along, and every detail of our evening, the hotel, even the money we'd just exchanged, had been choreographed for this moment. My blood ran cold, and my fists clenched at my sides. The questions that had been burning inside me now threatened to burst forth. But before I could speak, the atmosphere shifted. One of the men in the room, a tall figure with a sneer that dripped contempt, stepped forward. His eyes gleamed with malice as he barked something I couldn't quite make out, a sneering comment that hung in the air like a provocation. Without a moment's hesitation, Logan reacted. In a swift, almost instinctual motion honed by years of experience and danger, he drew his weapon and fired a single shot. The bullet found its mark, and the man crumpled to the floor, clutching his leg as a pained, disbelieving groan escaped his lips. The sound reverberated around the room, a brutal punctuation to the charged silence that followed. For the first time that night, I saw genuine fear flicker in Rachel's eyes. The carefree, enigmatic mask she'd worn moments ago melted away, replaced by an unmistakable vulnerability. It was as if the facade of seduction and indifference had finally cracked, revealing the raw emotion beneath. "Adam," she whispered, the single word laden with a mix of regret and something else I couldn't decipher. Her voice trembled slightly, and I noticed how her hands shook as she reached out, as if seeking some sort of connection or explanation. The room, once a carefully constructed theater of our shared past and hidden secrets, now felt like a battleground, a place where truth and lies were colliding with lethal force. I took a cautious step forward, every instinct in me screaming to demand answers, yet aware that in this precarious moment, words could be as dangerous as bullets. The luxurious setting, the expensive wine, and the air of calculated calm, all of it had led to this moment of collapse. The man's sneer, now replaced by a grimace of pain on the floor, was a stark reminder of how quickly the night could turn from a twisted performance into a scene of stark reality. "Come on," Rachel said, her voice quieter now, edged with a sincerity that left no room for doubt. It was a simple request, yet it carried the weight of surrender, a silent acknowledgement that the charade was over, that the high-stakes game of deception had reached its breaking point. She stepped toward the door, and without another word, I knew that deep down, she was just as scared as I was, scared of what we'd uncovered and what lay ahead. Logan kept a wary eye on the remaining figures in the room as we gathered our things. The tension was palpable, and every second felt like a lifetime stretched to its breaking point. With the evidence of betrayal, the violence that had just erupted, and the stark change in Rachel's demeanor, the fragile veneer of our shared life had crumbled irreparably. In that charged moment, as we moved to leave the room, the past and present collided in a maelstrom of anger, regret, and uncertain hope. The expensive trappings of the hotel, once symbols of sophistication, now seemed like cruel props in a play that had long since lost its plot. And as we stepped out into the uncertain night, the only thing I knew for sure was that everything had changed, and there was no turning back. When I walked through the door of our home that night, the weight of the revelations from the hotel still pressed on me like a vice. Every step echoed with the betrayal I'd uncovered, and I knew there was no more room for subtlety. The luxurious setting of our shared life, the opulent decor, the familiar photographs lining the walls, felt suddenly alien. I found Rachel in our living room, the soft glow of a table lamp casting long shadows that danced across her features. The smile that had once warmed me now seemed like a cruel reminder of the deceit that had seeped into every corner of our life. "Rachel, we need to talk," I said, my voice low and unyielding. I wasn't in the mood for polite conversation or excuses. Tonight was about raw truth, and I was done with the charade. I watched her eyes shift, a mixture of defiance and resignation mingling in their depths, as she set down the wine glass that had been a prop in our latest act of betrayal. "I suppose we do," she replied, her tone nonchalant. But I could sense the tremor beneath her calm facade. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Tell me everything," I demanded, stepping closer until the distance between us was charged with the tension of unspoken words. It didn't take long. With a mixture of bitterness and a strange sort of relief, she began to unravel the years of deceit. "I've been cheating on you for 11 months, she confessed almost casually. The words hit me like a barrage, each syllable tearing at the remnants of the life I thought I knew. I listened as she laid it out. Derek wasn't the first. The truth was that he was just one of 4. 3 others had come and gone, each leaving a scar on the fragile tapestry of our marriage. "You were always so boring, Adam," she continued, her voice growing louder, the hurt and disillusionment palpable. "I wanted adventure. I wanted to feel alive." It was as if she had been living a double life, one where the mundane routine of our existence was replaced by a thrilling, if illicit, escapade. Her words stung, each one a needle pricking the raw wound of my shattered trust. In that moment, amidst the chaos of revelations, I remained unerringly calm. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. With deliberate precision, I unlocked it and hit the record button. The conversation from the hotel, the undeniable evidence of her betrayal, played softly in the background, its digital whispers a testament to her indiscretions. I could see the flicker of panic cross her eyes as she realized what I was doing. The room seemed to close in on us, every detail amplified by the gravity of our situation. "You have 2 options," I said, my tone steady and controlled despite the storm raging inside me. Either you leave now, without any claim to the money and property we've built together, or your boss, your family, and all your friends will get this recording." The words hung in the air, a final ultimatum that left no room for negotiation. I wasn't the man who had once hesitated, who had believed in second chances. I was someone forged by betrayal and hardened by the need for retribution. For a long, agonizing moment, silence reigned. The only sound was the soft hum of the recorder capturing every word, every tremor of her voice as she absorbed the weight of my ultimatum. I watched as her defiant mask faltered, replaced by a dawning realization that the game she had played for so long was now spiraling out of control. With a final, shuddering exhale, she turned and headed for the door. Before she left, though, she paused. In that brief second of stillness, her eyes met mine again. The fierce defiance was gone, replaced by a cold, almost venomous whisper that clawed at the back of my mind. "You'll regret it later," she murmured, barely audible but seared into my consciousness as a promise, or perhaps a curse. I stood there, the echo of her words mingling with the digital evidence of our unraveling life, wondering if regret would ever find its way into my heart. As the door clicked shut behind her, leaving me alone in the dimly lit room filled with memories and shattered dreams, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The calm I had clung to had long evaporated, replaced by a simmering resolve that whispered of inevitable consequences. In the silence that followed, I realized that the choices laid before us were more than just ultimatums. They were the dividing lines of our futures. I had taken the first step into a dark, uncertain path, and as the minutes ticked by in the aftermath of her departure, I could only brace myself for the fallout. Whether it was vengeance, regret, or a series of unforeseen twists, one thing was certain. The truth had been revealed, and there was no turning back. 2 weeks later, the knock at the door shattered the uneasy calm I had been forcing myself to maintain. I opened it to see Rachel standing there, not alone this time. Behind her loomed Travis, a towering, muscular man with a predatory gaze that immediately set my nerves on edge. His presence reeked of trouble, like a fighter sizing up his next opponent in a ring. Rachel's expression was a mix of defiance and desperation, as if she had finally decided that she wasn't going to wait for me to come after her mistakes. "We need to talk," she said, her voice trembling ever so slightly. Before I could utter a single word, Travis stepped forward, his stance aggressive and his eyes fixed on mine. "We want that recording deleted," he stated, his tone flat but edged with a threat that sent a shiver down my spine. I didn't waste time. With a measured calm that belied the turmoil inside, I pulled out my phone and turned on the screen so that they could see the time-stamped recording, the digital embodiment of every moment of our past colliding with this very moment. "Listen carefully," I said, my voice steady. "If I don't press cancel in 15 minutes, this recording goes to 30 people. Your boss, your family, every single person who ever trusted you will hear every sordid detail." For a long, breathless minute, we stood in a tense standoff. Rachel's eyes flickered with a mix of regret and defiance, while Travis's jaw clenched as he reached slowly toward his jacket pocket. I recognized his movement as an attempt to draw a knife. Without even thinking, Logan sprang into action. In one swift, fluid motion honed by years of combat, he lunged forward and landed a crushing punch squarely on Travis's jaw. The sound of the impact was sickeningly satisfying as the would-be threat crumpled to the floor, groaning in a way that left no doubt he was out of the fight. I didn't waste a second. I stepped forward, locking eyes with Rachel, the weight of everything between us palpable in that charged moment. "Game over. You're going to disappear," I said, each word deliberate and laced with finality. The declaration wasn't just about the recording, it was about every lie, every betrayal that had led us to this point. Rachel's eyes widened for a fraction of a second, and then she looked away, her expression a mixture of resignation and a lingering spark of defiance. Without another word, she turned and left, the sound of her retreating footsteps echoing in the quiet aftermath of the confrontation. For a long moment after the door closed, I stood there, feeling the adrenaline ebb slowly from my veins as the gravity of the situation settled over me. Despite the decisive confrontation, a nagging voice in the back of my mind warned me that this wasn't truly over. I had dismantled her immediate plans, taken away her leverage by exposing every secret we'd shared, but the repercussions were only just beginning. Logan and I exchanged a look that said we both knew better than to let our guard down. In our line of work, be it from the days on the field or the turbulent aftermath of personal betrayal, there was rarely a moment of true peace. I could almost hear the echoes of future threats in the silence, each one a reminder that once you cross a line, the world has a way of pushing back. As I sank into the worn leather of my favorite chair, the soft hum of the recorder still lingering in my mind, I couldn't help but wonder what new shadows would emerge from the darkness. Rachel's final whispered threat, "You'll regret it later," played over and over in my thoughts. It was a promise wrapped in bitterness, a promise that maybe, just maybe, I'd one day wish I hadn't taken this path of retribution. I knew that the war was far from over. With every secret unveiled, every betrayal repaid, the stakes only grew higher. I was staring down the barrel of a future filled with uncertainty and danger. A future where every decision could ignite another spark in the volatile tinderbox of our shared history. And as I contemplated the road ahead, one thing was clear. I had set in motion a chain of events that would continue to haunt us both. For 18 days, my account became the battleground for someone trying, again and again, to drain it. Every attempt was thwarted, each withdrawal blocked by the bank's defenses, but it was a relentless assault that kept me awake at night. Then, as if that wasn't enough, the police showed up one morning. They were responding to anonymous complaints from neighbors about disturbances and strange figures around my property, complaints I had never even heard of before. It felt like someone was orchestrating an elaborate setup to make my life unravel. But the real, soul-crushing move came when I found a note in my house. I wasn't expecting visitors. The silence of my home had become my only solace after everything that had transpired. When I opened the door, there, lying on the welcome mat in a scrawled handwriting, was a simple message. "Miss me, love?" The words dripped with irony, a taunt from a woman who had turned betrayal into an art form. I didn't let the moment of shock linger. Instead, I leaned into the fight. Using my connections, old friends, reliable sources, people who knew how to handle dirty money and shady deals, I dug into the financial records. It didn't take long to uncover that Rachel and Travis had been running a parallel operation of financial shenanigans, siphoning money in ways that were both clever and dangerous. The evidence was irrefutable. Without wasting any time, I reached out to the right people, trusted allies from my past who owed me favors, individuals who specialized in making problems disappear. 4 days later, the news came through. Travis had vanished without a trace. It was as if he had been erased from existence, a decisive, brutal removal from the game he'd thought he could play. Then, at 2:30 in the dead of night, my phone rang from an unlisted number. I answered almost mechanically, and the voice on the other end was unmistakably Rachel's. Her tone trembled with a mix of fear and desperation. "They took him. I'm next," she whispered, the words hanging in the silence of the early morning. A cold smile spread across my face, a grim satisfaction mingling with the finality of it all. "I warned you, Rachel. You lost." I said it as if reciting a well-rehearsed line, the sound of my voice echoing in the darkness. With that, I hung up the phone, and this time for good. In that moment, I knew that the game was over. The web of deceit, betrayal, and revenge had reached its final act. Rachel's threats, her manipulations, had all culminated in a situation where there was no longer any escape for her. I had delivered the final blow, and the quiet aftermath of that call marked the end of a bitter chapter in my life. I sat in the silence of my now empty home, the echoes of past promises and shattered dreams mingling with the resolute peace of a battle finally won. The night was still, save for the distant hum of city life continuing unabated, oblivious to the war that had just been fought in the shadows. And as I leaned back, I couldn't help but think, some things are lost forever, And in the end, betrayal always comes with a price.